All right, perfect. So welcome everyone to our August Chicago Tug. I am so happy you all are here. We have a great event planned out. So starting with the agenda, I'm Ashley. Welcome. We'll go over some announcements. Then Sam will talk about the dashboard design process, which will be very exciting. Our very own co-leader, Tom, is going to kick off a hopefully reoccurring session, a showcase where, people can show different dashboards that they've created and just kind of show off their skills and get advice if they're looking for it. Then Jack, who'll be joining us a little later, is going to be talking about Tableau Prep Builder. So some things you can do with Tableau Prep Builder, as well as some of the basics to get started. Then we'll wrap up, and anyone who's interested sticking around for a virtual networking session, we'd love to have you. So for our announcements, really before this event has even been going on for more than 6 minutes, we're going to plug our next event. So our Q4 tug will be on November 3rd. So mark your calendars now, cancel all plans for that day. If you have any, this is where you want to be. Another shout out, Kevin Ford, who is our other Chicago tug leader. He unfortunately couldn't make today's meeting, but he does have an open position on his team. So if anyone here is an experienced SQL coder and Tableau developer, and they want to join an awesome team at Discover, reach out to him through LinkedIn. And then if you're interested in joining us on our leadership team, reach out to us. We'd love to chat with you. So to kick things off, I'm going to let Sam share here in a second, but just to kind of brag about Sam, he is a lead solution engineer at Tableau, or at Salesforce/Tableau, 4-time Viz of the Day winner. That is awesome. A dream that I know I have and many others probably have. Maybe you've done it. If so, congratulations. And then he's a Tableau public featured author. So with that being said, Sam, I will stop sharing so you can take it over.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
I have to select the screen and then press share.
Now we got it.
Wonderful. It's 5:08 here in Minneapolis. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you to the Chicago Tableau User Group team. I think I reached back out in like February or March. And this is kind of what it's all come to. So grateful for the opportunity to share. And I also want to thank everyone here who's attending, because you're taking time out of your day that you could be with family or friends or working or with kids or whatnot, to invest in yourself. To grow. So props to you. Thanks for being here. And I look forward to sharing some lessons that I've learned. But as it comes to today's agenda, a quick disclaimer, a little bit of background on me, and then I'm going to walk through my process and then walk through an example about Makeover Monday. It's an American Time Use Survey, a challenge that was released back in 2019, and I'll share some of my favorite Tableau resources, and then I'll have some time for Q&A there at the end. So a quick disclaimer. So the process that I'm about to describe here, this is something that over the course of my career that I've developed. This does not represent the best practices of Tableau at Salesforce or of any former employer or people that I've worked with. It's kind of a compilation of different lessons and observations from books that I've read and different things. So just putting that out there. I've been influenced by so many people in the data visualization community over the last 2.5 years that I've been a part of it. And this is kind of the process that I've put together, but it's not necessarily just mine or no one else's. So a little bit about me. So I live in Hopkins, Minnesota, which is in the western metro of Minneapolis. I'm married, and my wife and I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. This last Sunday, I got promoted to second lieutenant and commissioned within the Minnesota Army National Guard. With respect to my career, I've been in the data and analytics space since 2013. Started doing Tableau consulting work back in 2020, right as things were shutting down with the pandemic, and then joined Tableau as a lead solution engineer here back in May. I'm heavily involved in the Tableau community. As Ashley had mentioned, Tableau public featured author for Visit the Days. I've posted over 400 visualizations to my Tableau public profile. Super involved with all things Workout Wednesday, Back to Viz Basics, which I see Elisa here on the call, and she co-runs that with Eric Balish. Sports Viz Sunday and Makeover Monday, which I'm super pumped. It's coming back. That was just announced at the New York Tableau user group a couple of days ago. So and there's a couple of pictures, my wife and I and our kids. And then in the midst of the pandemic, when people were doing fun Zoom backgrounds, I created a Zoom background of me walking in on myself, and it confuses the snot out of people. But anyway, jumping over to my dashboard design process, just thinking through just at a very high level, and I'll dig into these a little bit more deeply as we kind of approach each step. But the way that I look at it is understanding your audience, knowing who you're communicating with, what they care about, what they need to know, all those different types of things. That's priority number 1. Then as you know who you're going to talk to, it's a matter of getting the right type of data to assist you in telling a story, making sure that it's from a trustworthy source, and that, if there's any caveats that you need to communicate, that you do so accordingly and transparently as well. Next, exploring insights about data that you're able to help uncover potential story points that then you can compile using, and the 4th point here, the appropriate chart that allows you to tell the story clearly. And then it kind of goes into point 5 here of using best practices. So not violating some of the tools of the trade, and there are no real hard and fast rules of thumb or best practices, but there are kind of generally accepted principles when it comes to data visualization and dashboard design, and I'll walk through a few of those. In addition to that, once you've gotten the charts constructed and you have they're good, well designed, well thought out, then compiling all of these things together into a single user interface known as a dashboard, and being able to do that in a way that allows your end user to have a very clear flow for, okay, I get to this dashboard and what am I doing? Am I guiding them with text? Am I using pre-attentive attributes and color and different things? And then last but not least, sharing your work. So depending on if you're just doing Tableau or data visualization for fun, and you're doing it on Tableau Public, or if you're building visualizations for work and you're in, maybe an air-gapped environment, if you work for the federal government, where you can't have access to the internet, you have to do like a Tableau server or Tableau Online, or Tableau Cloud now. So being able to communicate, collaborate, and share with others the work that you've done. But I will move on into the first of the 7 components here. So understanding who your audience is. So as it relates to that, you need to be thinking about, what do they care about? Are there certain things that they're responsible for in their job that, if you're able to provide them with the insights that they need, then it makes their life easier. So think about who you're building for, along with, how would they look to interact with this? An example I like to use with this is, let's say, for instance, that, you work at a big corporate headquarters, and you're making visualizations for kind of the general employee population. And if you think, oh, this is going to be great, I'm going to have filters and different components that are interactive so they can explore it. But then you come to find out that this visualization is going to be published on monitors all around the corporate campus, where they're not touchscreen TVs. You just wasted a bunch of time, or building a bunch of interactivity, which could be really cool, but if it doesn't fit your audience, then it's wasted time. So think about how your audience and how your end user is going to be interacting with the dashboard, and that can help kind of guide you for the different things that you could look to build into it. And the last point here, thinking about the devices that you're looking to build in. I know that probably 98% of the visualizations that I've built, I delete the little mobile layout in Tableau because I do a lot of custom backgrounds in Figma, and it doesn't really bode well for that. When I'm trying to do kind of a custom view, so I'd have to do a separate custom one just for mobile. But there was a place I worked probably 2.5, 3 years ago where we were trying to get dashboards built and presented in front of the executive sponsors. And we come to find out that the adoption was basically zero. And we were so confused as to why. We couldn't figure out why are these executives who are like fighting so hard for business intelligence tools, embedded into the decision-making process, what's going on? We come to find out that when we dove into some of the analytics behind the platform they were on, they were all looking at it from mobile. And we were building with a 16:9, just like big 40-inch screen at your desk type of thing in mind. And we come to find out, oh, they're working on 5 inches of real estate. We need to rethink how we're designing the user experience. So understand your audience. That's probably about 30 to 40% of the content that I have to lay out today, because it's so important. If you don't understand who your end user is, I think this is a South Park reference, but you're going to have a bad time. Moving on to gathering data. So we know who our user is. We know how we need to present data to them. Now let's think about, okay, let's say we're talking about sales data. We have to be able to get that from a source that we know is accurate. So in addition to that, knowing what each different component of that data source, that sales data source means. There have been instances where we get, there was a company I worked for probably about 5 years ago that their column headers were 6 seemingly random, 6 character long strings that were a jumbled mess. Because they were coming out of like a COBOL based system that was developed in like the 70s or the 80s. And that's like, I don't know what RxCl 47 is. I don't know what that is. So like having a data dictionary to be able to cross-reference specific fields, how they're intended to be used, the different characteristics, the metadata that goes into that, being able to leverage that type of additional supplementary information can be incredibly helpful for knowing what you're referencing and being able to kind of expedite the development process as it comes to that. So in addition to that, before I move on to the next point here, is making sure that you're citing your sources. So giving credit where it's due. Every visualization that I'm putting together, I do a lot of sports visualizations. I'm a sports nut, love the stuff. A lot of the stuff I'll get from like Pro Football Reference, and I'm always referencing that because they did the hard work of gathering that, curating that, and providing me with a free data source that I can use to tell a cool story with data. So I'm not a fan of plagiarizing or taking credit for the work of others, but it's incredibly important to make sure that you're giving credit. In addition to a business context, it's super important because I've participated in a handful of meetings where you've got 2 executives who they're type A personalities, and they know that their numbers are right, but the numbers are different. And they're jabbing at each other saying, no, I'm right. This is what the data is. This is our sales data. And the other executives, well, you are obviously wrong because my number is different, and they're fighting at each other. If you're able to point to the thought is a single source of truth, point to one data source, and then if there are manipulations, certain rows that are filtered out, we didn't use this revenue field because it doesn't incorporate X, Y, or Z. Being able to make sure that you can put all of the disclaimers at the front end of it, so that way they're all working from the same sheet of music. It's incredibly important to be able to communicate that so that you can inspire trust in the visualizations that you develop. So next, looking at insights and being able to explore the data and kind of dive into it. There are a couple of things that I generally look for when I'm developing visualizations. I'm thinking about trends. So whether that's, with a lot of data over time, there's a lot of line charts to see, is there seasonality? If you look at the Superstore data set that comes packaged with Tableau, with that, you have, Q4 is always really strong because you've got November and December that are really, really positive sales months. And, just being able to look at a chart, you're able to get that insight that Q4 is very strong. So that's a quick example with trends. Thinking about patterns or correlations. So I'll be referencing a lot of the Superstore stuff here, but the relationship between sales and profit, or sales and discount, or profit ratio and discount. Thinking about those different relationships to figure out, if we move this, if we modify this lever, how does that impact things in a different way? Looking at different relationships with that. Values by dimension groups. And what I mean by that, categorical variables, groups, categories. So with Superstore, you've got the customer segment, which is either, I think it's consumer, corporate, and home office. I think are the three categories for that. So seeing that, maybe one section of the organization, they have a very high level of profit within a certain segment compared to a different one. Or we're not selling a lot of office machines to home offices because they're big machines that cost a lot of money, and maybe the target customer is a little different. So thinking about exploring those types of insights or differences between different groups. The last point here is thinking about anomalies or outliers. So let's say that your organization, they do 100,000 in revenue a day, and that's just kind of the way things have been. Cost of living type of growth rates, 3 to 5% kind of year over year, and all is well. And then one day you log in and you see yesterday's sales were $200,000 or $2 million, and you're like, this is totally awesome. I hit my numbers for the month and the third of the month or whatever. But then is this right? And that being able to explore and validate, is this data correct? As well as, the reason why we absolutely knocked our sales numbers out of the water is because we had this tremendous sales day. That was because Steve did a really good job selling those copiers. So thinking about how you can point to specific things that are outside of the ordinary, both from a validation standpoint and also from a storytelling perspective. Moving on to the types of charts that you're selecting to communicate. So depending on the type of story that you're looking to tell, this will kind of dictate and influence what you use. So with that example, with the values by dimension groups, bar charts are great for this because you're able to assign a length to a specific value, and our brains interpret that length very cleanly and easily. Another example, when you're working with dimensions, particularly with hierarchies, tree maps. Tree maps are great. The caveat with that is if you're using like profit, it's possible to have negative profit. Tree maps don't necessarily have a great way of encoding negative values or negative space. So think about the fields you're using as you're developing and choose the appropriate type of chart type with that. When it comes to values over time, line charts are a very simple, clear, clean way to communicate change over time. Area charts are also great for that. Sometimes you can use a bar. If you work in the project management, like PMO, construction engineering, or construction management type of space, Gantt charts are really popular because you're able to see when certain segments start and stop and overlap. So if the people who installed the tile, there's a tile shortage and they have to delay it by 2 months, what other cascading effects is that going to cause, where you got a bottleneck with tile and then you can't install the carpet or you can't paint the walls or something. So that's a great way to communicate things with time. Maps, geographical data, that's pretty standard. When it comes to comparing different things, bullet charts are a great way to do that. And a bullet chart, basically imagine a bar chart with either a reference line or series of shading sitting kind of behind the bar. So you can see how a specific value is compared to either a specific target or against prior values. So that's a good example with bullet charts. Distributions of values, we're going to talk through that a little bit more heavily here with the data set that we're working with Makeover Monday, but histograms are great for showing kind of how things are distributed. Box and whisker plots, that's a great way to have a lot of the points on the visualization and that are displayed so that you can see, are they tightly packed or are they spread out a lot, or do we have a lot of outliers or anomalies? Another thing is a density plot. So I've seen this done quite a bit with scatter plots and with maps. That's a great way to kind of see, are things all stacked up on top of each other? So when it comes to distributions, those are a couple things. In the last section here with the portion of total, I kind of refer to this as the baked goods section because you've got bars, pies, and donuts. I have a sweet tooth, so I do appreciate that. However, I will throw the caveat that pies and donuts may not necessarily be the best choice. Use your best judgment when it comes to pies and donuts, because let's say you're trying to encode, sales by state, and you've got 50 states in your data set. As after about the top 10th, like values 10 through 50 are going to be small, teeny tiny little slivers. And if you're trying to compare the 38th largest state against the 50th, it can be really hard to, we're dealing with fractional degrees here. It might not be the easiest way to communicate. So if you are using pies or donuts, I'd say limit it to no more than maybe 5 groups, because it gets really hard for your user to interpret and see the relationships with angles and how they interpret that. So that is what I have to say about chart type selection. Thinking about some best practices, if you understand which chart types make the most sense, you can choose those. Don't mislead your user. An example I like to reference here. So we saw the family of the picture of my family there. My 2 boys, they're probably like 3'6" and 3'2", and my daughter, she just started standing. So I'm going to say she's 2.5 feet tall. My wife's like 5'6", and I'm 5'10". With a bar chart that starts at 0, you get an accurate representation of how tall we are. If we start that at 2 feet tall, or at my daughter's height at like 2'6", my daughter does not exist, or she's very, very teeny, and then I look enormous. So it can manipulate the way that you interpret the data visually. So don't mislead your user. Don't set them up to where they'll make the wrong interpretation based off of your data. And then when it comes to reversing an axis, there's the reported relationship between shark attacks and ice cream sales. If you were to invert one of those axes and you didn't communicate that, there could be shark attacks, when those are at all-time highs, ice cream sales are low because people avoid the beach. It's like people could get the wrong message from it. So it's important to make sure that you're not misleading your user. Leverage pre-attentive attributes. You can Google that. It's a really simple way to kind of hack how our minds work into interpreting data more quickly and more efficiently. And then Gestalt principles are very closely related to pre-attentive attributes. Concepts like hue or saturation or enclosure, just different ways that our minds work as we see, and kind of how our brains have evolved, where you can leverage some of those, you can leverage the way that your brain works to communicate messages more cleanly and effectively and more timely. So then you've got great charts that are well designed and don't mislead your user. You've done a lot of analysis, and now you get to assemble these things together. This is where it gets really, really fun. Think about assembling it, and think about the story that you're putting kind of on a plate. So this is like you're plating your meal so that you can take it out to the person that's ordered the food, and they can see it and they understand, stab the potatoes with a fork, those types of different things. So think about padding and space. If it makes sense, use text or color to communicate specific points cleanly. Think about, if you understand your audience, which type of interactivity is appropriate. And then kind of a user path that I like to kind of think through is, situational awareness. What is going on? Why are things different than maybe expectations or compared to last year? Why are things the way they are? And then how can we do something about it? So that's where a lot of organizations, when it comes to data viz, they'll stop around like, why is this happening? And they don't identify particular action points where, we need to talk to, Steve, who had that $2 million day. We need to talk to him because his average selling price or his discount is like super high or something. So having addressable talking points that you can take action with. And last but not least, sharing your work. So if it's internal, you're most likely running with Tableau Server or Tableau. I need to update this to cloud to control access and permissions around that. If it's external or public facing, think about Tableau Public. There's more than 2 million authors around the world, and I think like 5 million visualizations that have been put out by those authors. So it's a great place to share and distribute things publicly. So with that, I'm going to fly through this example here. So the American Time Use survey from the 2019 Makeover Monday, week 23. Basically, there's several different components to this data: the year of the measurement, the age of the age band that someone belongs to, their sex, and then the type of day. Is this like a weekend or a holiday, or is this a weekday? So let's be like Buddy the Elf here and jump in. All right, so I've done all of this work for you, but basically leveraging some of the principles that I've kind of shared. So I'm using text in this dashboard to be able to communicate the message that Americans like to sleep in on the weekends. And if we focus in on that message, what we can see: weekend days and holidays, weekends and holidays. That is the story. And there aren't a whole lot of big differences in terms of change, except for this slope chart line here, going to show how things have evolved over 2003 to 2017, and then encouraging exploration within this data to say, for this cohort, what if we focus in on the older population? And what we can see is they are very tightly packed. And I'm going to run through a couple of charts here to show kind of this process for how I got to that end result. Identifying insights, looking at a line chart by each measurement cohort group. What we see here, it's really wiggly, and there's ups and downs pretty much every year. So this doesn't necessarily help us when it comes to having a good insight with respect to this. And there's a jitter kind of circle plot, basically the same message, where there's a lot of variability, but there's no real clear trend with respect to that. Looking at the type of day, and remember we had the 65 and older cohort, what we see is that they get a pretty consistent amount of sleep. But what we see is that the non-holiday weekdays, those are lower. People are having to wake up for work, they're getting less sleep, and it's affecting their ability to be able to get a good amount of rest compared to those who on the weekends you can sleep in. Looking at men versus women, there's not much of a difference there, so no real story there. This is what I would kind of classify as the money making chart here, because you've got you can see the different cohorts. The elderly population, 65 and older, they have the most consistent sleep. And then when you break it out by the different age groups, you kind of see this curve that takes place here. And what you see is that, oh, well, I guess that kind of makes sense, because if you think about the amount of sleep that someone would be getting on, in their working years, 25 maybe to 64, they're having to work during the week on average, so they're getting less sleep. On the weekends, that's kind of their rest time. And then people 15 to 24, they don't have maybe jobs or maybe as much responsibility, or they're in college, so they get to have more sleep during the week and on the weekends. So that's kind of the big lesson with that. And then looking at it by bin, and I've got a histogram that shows some additional context with that, but being able to compare different groups against the whole. And then the slope chart, which a slope chart basically you pick 2 of the points and then you draw a line between the points. So it's a very simplified version of a line chart. And doing all of that, able to tell a clear story, call out specific items related to that, and that enables you to communicate a very clear message where someone can jump into this dashboard and within about 2 or 3 minutes, they know what they can do, they know the high level story, and they're inspired to explore. So with that, I'll jump back, get fully across the street, buddy, and move on to some quick resources. I've got a lot of stuff here. Leverage what the Tableau community already has out there. The e-learning platform, that's how I learned Tableau. the knowledge base. If you need documentation, they've got thousands of pages of documentation, either in PDFs or in web pages, to help you understand the nuances of the tool. You are already taking advantage of that third bullet point by being involved in a Tableau user group. So props to you for being here. If you haven't done so, attend Tableau conference. Last couple of years, they've had, with obviously COVID, it's had to be remote. This last year was the first year since 2019. They had an in-person component and it was a blast. So would highly recommend, if you get a chance to go. It's so much fun. Follow Tableau Visionaries, formerly known as Zen Masters, on social media, and DataFam on Twitter. Tableau Public Community Challenges, that's part of the reason why I've got as many visualizations on Tableau Public. Workout Wednesday, if you're looking to develop your technical competencies, participate in that. There are some challenges out there where, that's part of the reason why I shaved my head, because otherwise it looks like I pulled my hair out. It is a great way for you to stretch your understanding of, oh my goodness, I had no idea Tableau could do that. I'm going to take that kind of tool or that tactic and apply that and just completely blow the socks off the people that I work with, because they're going to be like, I had no idea Tableau could do that. And it's a great way to expose yourself to a lot of different ways to use the tool. Back to Biz Basics, which one of the co-runners for that, Lisa Davis, she's on. Basically, there's like an example of a challenge with that, where it'll be like, make a scatter plot or make a bar chart. And it's a very simple challenge. You don't have to use Tableau for it. Most people probably do. But what that allows you to do is just start with a very simple thing where you have data that they provide for you, and you're able to explore the story that you can tell, and then kind of leveraging the prompt, taking that and saying, okay, how can I use a bar chart in this case to tell a good, compelling story? The most recent one that was released like a week and a half ago was all about using annotations effectively. So calling out different components of the story to communicate a specific message. So would highly recommend jumping at that. It just started this year. And I think there's 16 or 17 challenges out there now. So Makeover Monday, when we had booked this presentation, Makeover Monday had been kind of on a hiatus since October or so of 2021. And I was very sad, because Makeover Monday, it's very similar to Back to Biz Basics, except it's way more open-ended, where they provide you with the data set and kind of a chart that's been poorly designed, and say, have at it, go build something cool. And go something that effectively tells a story better than this other chart. As of like 3 days ago, it just got announced that Makeover Monday is coming back this upcoming Monday. So I am so happy. And anyway, moving on, I like to read. Here are a handful of my favorites within data visualization. Some ones that I'll call out. If you're new to data visualization, Storytelling with Data is a tool agnostic book. It walks through a lot of these storytelling concepts, Gestalt principles. I might be Gestalt. I probably just butchered that. But then, different lessons that you can apply. If you're building this in Excel or you're using Tableau or Power BI, just how do you communicate effectively with data? How Charts Lie is a quick and easy read, but it is very fascinating, thinking about how data visualization can be used to manipulate and stretch the story. So taking that in mind, how can we go about not kind of falling victim to implementing these things that manipulate, so we can be more trusted with our storytelling. If you are in a dry spell with data visualizations and you're banging your head against your desk or the wall, or what have, various objects at your ready, Big Book of Dashboards is a great way to it's a great way to get quick inspiration. They've got, I think it's like 25 or 30 chapters with really great examples of dashboards. If you're looking for more technical books, the two that I have listed there from Ryan Sleeper, Practical Tableau and Innovative Tableau, are great. Each of them has 100 tips, kind of tools or tactics that you can use to kind of maximize what Tableau can bring to the table. And then Tableau Strategies by Ann Jackson and Luke Stanke. Both of them are Tableau visionaries. And Ann, for the first 4 years of Workout Wednesday, she co-ran that community project, and Luke still contributes to it today. I highly recommend all of these books. Makeover Monday, that came out a couple years ago, and I'm so pumped that the challenge is coming back. But with that, what questions do those from the group have? And I have not been monitoring. Oh goodness, 27 messages in the chat.
It's all of us just chatting around. Thanks so much for this, Sam. By the way, this was all fantastic. I have an easy softball question to tee you up. So you've been doing this for quite some time. How did you get your start? And what along the way did you use that kind of like got you into like the next level or the next level?
Yeah. So when it came to me getting my start, because I was coming from a background where I was working with a medical devices company here in the cities, and the tool that I was working with was Power BI. And Microsoft's got a good tool. It communicates data pretty clearly. No knocks against it. But I was looking to make a career transition, and I landed a job in consulting. And the company was a Tableau partner, and the large majority of the work they did was Tableau. And I kind of had an oh no moment, super imposter syndrome, because I don't know how to do much of anything in Tableau at this point in time in February of 2020. So Tableau Elearning, I went out and bought the license for it, so I could like figure out, beginner, okay, here's how I connect the data, here's how I build basic charts, here's how I do data blending, here's how I do relationships and the data model and stuff. That's what got me kind of got my feet wet. And then the very first week that I was at work, one of my peers invited me to a meeting where there was a couple of different consultants, and we met and we worked on, for like a half hour, we worked on a Workout Wednesday. And I was like, this is super cool. There are challenges. I love this. And that's really where I decided to run at that, and made the decision that, I'm going to do every Workout Wednesday that's on their website. And I've done 2018. I went back and did 2018 all the way through. And the only one I haven't done is this week's, because Luke Stanky released it last night, and I'm banging my head against the wall trying to figure out how to do it. So that's how I got my start. If you are brand new to data visualization, but you've got some experience in like business intelligence or analytics, the Tableau community on Twitter, if you don't have a Twitter, get one, follow DataFam, and just follow the people who are making cool stuff. And even if you're not developing or publishing things, like contribute, nominate things for Visit of the Day, like find the different things that inspire you and bookmark those and save those, so that when you feel like you've got the kind of the technical chops to make things happen, you can do that. So yeah.
Awesome. That's a good answer, Sam. Anyone else have questions for Sam?
Do you have a favorite viz on your Tableau public? I know it was out there in the chat, so I was curious if you have one you're particularly in love with.
One that I'm particularly in love with, my wife and I, over the course of the last couple of months, we've gotten really into hockey. And I've got my oldest son, he's 5. He's going into his very first year of youth hockey, come here in a couple of weeks. This was like during in the midst of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I was like, well, I wonder what's the history of all of these different hockey teams, and what have been the caliber and quality of the teams, and what are the relationships between different variables. And then when have these teams played in the Stanley Cup finals, or when have they made the playoffs? And the Montreal Canadiens, for those of you who don't know hockey, there was a period of time between like 1940 something and 1967 where there were only 6 teams. So the Montreal Canadiens, they made the playoffs basically every year, and you'll see this here. When I click on Montreal, it'll change a couple of things. But yeah, they basically made the playoffs for forever and won a stupid number of Stanley Cups during that time. So this is probably my favorite visualization. It is one of the more, there you go. Yeah. They went to the playoffs basically every year from 1927 until about 1998. But again, like they were, and if I filter this just to the original 6 era, 1943 to 67, like they hit it every year except for 48. So like this was a really technically challenging viz to put together, but I wanted to make sure I got it out in time right before the Stanley Cup playoffs. So, yeah, I'd say this is probably my favorite viz. And I agree with you, Elisa. Twitter is not just for journalists and Elon Musk. So, are there any other questions? I'm happy to take any question. If there are no further questions, if you'd like to connect with me on social media or follow me on Tableau Public or Instagram, I don't publish there a whole lot, but yeah, basically look for Sam Epley, or on Twitter, it's Epley Samuel, and you can find me there. I'm happy to connect with anybody who's just getting their start, or they've been well established in the community and they just want to chat. And yeah, I'm happy to be a resource, happy to listen, and happy to give feedback on different things. So
awesome. Thank you for your time today, Sam. And everyone here should take Sam up on that and go connect with him anywhere and everywhere. I think I encountered some of your work at the early part of the pandemic as well. I think that's when I started doing a little bit more stuff digitally on Tableau Public. And boy, there's just like a long list of cool things that Sam has done. And each one of them, I was like, okay, I'm using this as inspiration. I'm using this as inspiration. So go follow Sam. You'll personally be rewarded.
thank you, Tom.
I'm going to take over real quick here. My session is going to be pretty short. And then we have one additional session after me talking about Tableau prep. So I highly recommend sticking around for the Tableau prep content if y'all have extra time. It's a really cool one. We have not done any prep content really since the, I guess the birth of the Chai Tug. And I think now, like, it's been a product that's in circulation for the last couple of years. So there are now people that are kind of emerging as like experts in that field. So cool content to come on that. For the short term though, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a second to get this set up. All right, Ashley, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I am going to share with y'all a viz that I put together a few years ago, and I've actually shared with this group back before the pandemic started. I've since added a few things to it. It's funny, it still says Chicago on here. I need to change this to say Ann Arbor because I no longer live in Chicago. But I would like to share this today for two reasons. One, we made an ask out to everybody earlier in the month saying like, hey, anyone in our community got something cool they want to share? We didn't really hear back from anyone yet, so I decided to step up to the plate. But I want to make this as just a general note to everybody on this call, as well as like anyone watching this in the future on YouTube or whatever. We want to make this community one where people can share and participate with one another in cool ways. So if you have something cool that you want to share, we would love to have you featured in a future session of ours to share your cool stuff that you're putting out into Tableau Public, or it doesn't even have to be vizzes. I think, you know, one of the things that we're focusing on here is prep later today. So like, we welcome cool things like someone doing something really neat with Python, or someone doing something really, really cool with SQL views that's enabling cool things in Tableau. The stuff that gets up in the front page often of Tableau always has to do with like vizzes and the cool graphics and visuals. And I'm a creative type myself, so I highly value those things. But the technical elements behind all of those things are what make them kind of run and function. And those are equally as important too. So if people have things to share like that in the future, we highly recommend or highly encourage you to share those things with us so that we can showcase them in the future. What I'm going to show today, and I think this would be particularly useful for new people, is my Tableau resume. I'm going to walk through how I built it and just kind of the nuts and bolts of it. I know for a fact that a couple of juniors that I've helped mentor over the years have actually gone and built their resume using Tableau, and it has enabled them to find very good jobs since then. People have been very impressed by the fact that people are putting the resume together in Tableau. Shows a dedication to the product and interest in actually using it to do cool things. So I'm going to cover how my resume is put together briefly here today, and then probably open it up to questions if anyone has specific questions on how I assembled everything. And then we'll, like I said, reconvene after that to go over Tableau Public with our final speaker. So without further ado, this is my Tableau Public page. You can see a couple of things that I've made in here. Like I said, I don't have anything nearly as impressive as Sam, just a handful of vizzes, but let's go to my Tableau resume here really quickly. So I assembled this right before the pandemic and have since gone back to update it a handful of times. But really what I'm just trying to show here is, a quick introduction to myself, a little like vignette picture of me from a few years back. I've actually got some icons down here, and I'll show you how these things work in a second. But if I want to go to, like, say, my portfolio website, I can click on that link and it brings me to my portfolio, which also is in dire need of updating. Or you can go find me on LinkedIn from that icon there. I'll show everyone how those links work. Oh, there's Ashley hanging out right there, and Kevin. So I've got all my links down here to go find me in these various locations. And then a quick look at my software skills and my non-software skills. At some point, I used to actually have software skills and or hard skills and soft skills. I've since changed that because I'm under the impression that soft skills shouldn't be called soft skills. They're just non-software skills. These are just as important to the software thing. There's nothing soft about them. So anyways, I've got Tableau listed as like a 10 out of 10. I feel like I'm a master of that product. Same with Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. I, like Sam, spend a lot of time doing actual graphics as well too. And then all the way down here to, like, actually, I should update this because my Figma skills are much better than they used to be at the time. Same with my Adobe XD. I know a little bit of Python, etc. Going over to my non-software skills, I've got all these things kind of maxed out, and then down to the smaller things like ethnography. I still do a little bit of this right now, but I'm still learning. I also built this Gantt chart. So Sam mentioned this earlier about like timelines. This is really useful for understanding timelines. So I've got a Gantt chart of my career. So I started out in 2009 all the way up to the current date. And I can hover over each one of these and see, like, okay, here's when Tom was in college. Then he was doing some internships. Then I went and got my master's degree while I was doing a little bit of work here. And then I got my first big boy job afterwards, and then switched over to my current employer. And then these are my two new roles, and I don't even have my most recent role on here. So how did we build all of this, and how do we get all this to work? My first and primary thing that I had to do was actually create the data that goes behind all of this, because obviously without any data, can't really build it in Tableau. And I actually think that's one of the most impressive things about doing this is I had to put the data together, which also means that I had to understand the modeling of how the data was going to work to get all these visualizations to function. So it's not just simply putting all this information into Excel, it's putting it into Excel and then structuring the table dimensionality such that all of these graphics would work correctly. So maybe not immediately apparent when doing something like this, but I actually think that's really impressive to a potential or future employer. So you have to sit and think about how the dimensionality of the data works in order to get the viz to work. So let's switch over to Tableau. I've got it pulled up here. So this is my viz here. Let me see if I can move this. Yep, cool. Okay, so here's our viz here. I'm going to cover a couple of things that are on here. First of all, let's go into here. So I've got 3 data sets that I'm actually leveraging. One that I've called skills, one that's called software, one that's called timeline. And I'll show each one of those things here in just a second. In addition to that, I've got my clickable icons here and then a couple of graphics. So from left to right, top to bottom, I'm going to just go over how I built each one of these things. So text is text, obviously. To get the picture kind of cut like this, Photoshop, you can do whatever it is that you need to do to kind of get this to fit the space that you're looking to fit. First thing for the images. So I built all these icons on my own. Again, just another thing that I was like, want to show off that I can do that kind of stuff. But if we go into the layout to these actual elements, so you'll see, whoops, don't want to actually launch that. So I've got this horizontal container right here, and I've got each one of these icons. I've got email, website, LinkedIn, Medium, and Twitter. So I'm going to go to website and just pull that up over here. So I've got a tiny little icon that's showing up for website over here. And what I've done is I actually just dropped software skills. I just dropped a random thing onto the view that I know is always going to be present within the data set. The real reason I want to do this is because I just wanted an object that is a placeholder of the clickable icon. And then I just wanted to attach some sort of a function to that actual clickable icon. So if I go back over to the Viz view over here, and we should go to the actions, which are under here. So I've got like some filter actions and other things here, but I've got all these hyperlinks. So I need data attached to these icons in order to launch these hyperlink activities. So that's why I've gone ahead and just attached each one of these to a data field within my data set. Is purely just it's a vector essentially to hold that information so I can launch the hyperlink from there. And so I've just gone through each one of these icons individually and assigned it this hyperlink so that on click, I'll go and edit this one, for instance. So this one's called email, and I have a run action on select, and that action is to open a mail to my Gmail account. And so that Tableau takes care of all of that, and it just launches, like you saw earlier, like an email window, and it preps an email. Next thing kind of going over. So let's go to each one of these bar charts. So I really like how these bar charts look. However, in order to get the max score on here, I needed to make sure I had a 10 available in each one of my rows. So you'll see over here, I have score. Actually, let's start here. We'll go to max. So I've got score copy, and then I've got just the normal score out there as well. Score max, sorry, that's what it is. So let's make a table really fast and look at those things. I need to make one of these a max. Actually, nope. Duh, you want to put max out score. So we'll put max score out there. So in order to get those gray bars to show up in this stacked bar, or in this dual axis bar chart, basically, I need a max score that's always set to 10. And then I need the actual score value of the item that I'm going to put out there. And so what we end up doing by stacking those two things out here, you can see this is a dual axis chart that I've essentially then moved both of the bars into the same lane together. What that effectively ends up doing for me actually is I now have two bars. There's a blue bar. You can see like the black that's showing up around the actual blue selection there. And then there's a gray bar below it that gives me that effect of it's not quite filled up. And so that's just accomplished by doing this thing with the max score versus the actual score I want to show. Another cool trick that I like to use on a lot of these is to get the bars to be the exact same size. I don't know if y'all have ever played around with the size slider on things, but it's really hard to get things to be the exact same size unless you either use the middle set or the outside. So what I've done is created a parameter that's called bar size. You can see here, I've set this to be in a range of 1 to 100. Right now, the current value is set to 15 or something like that. And I've now got bar size in the data set section over here. And I'm just calling it as parameters bar size, and then I've put it in there. What this allows me to do, because I have it around a range and it's now a value in my table, so I can actually drop it on size. And now I have full control over a very specific size of the bar that I want. And I can use the parameter then to dial in the exact specific bar size that I want. I could have easily made this parameter like a 1 out of 10, but then I don't have a whole lot of granularity on the actual bar size itself. But you can make that 1 out of 100,000 if you wanted to get hyper specific about the size of that thing. But what's really nice is I can use bar size on both of my charts to get the exact same bar size on both visualizations and graphics. And that's the real reason I end up using this, is just to ensure that I'm getting uniform visualization fidelity on both ends of the side of this thing. that's a cool trick that I learned a while back, and I use it on most of my visualizations now to just make sure that I know exactly what size I'm going for on a particular icon or item. Going down to the Gantt chart really quickly. So we've got a standard Gantt chart here that's showing 3 different things. I've got employment, internship, and higher education in these 3 different colors. Gantt charts, I think, are kind of hard to build sometimes. They take a little bit of finesse. So I'm going to look at the table view over here really quick. Let's look at the, let's see, view data. So this is my Gantt view, and you can see I've got a description in here that goes into the actual tooltip of the viz. So that one column is obviously really, really long and wide, but I've got a field called date length. And then I've got end date and I've got start date. And so in order to build a Gantt chart, you need a couple of things. You need a start date and you need an end date, and then you need a length. And it's really just a value in order to get the Gantt chart to visualize in this like staggered order that we have available. Oops, that's on the other sheet, sorry. And then I've also then added just like an ID to double check and make sure that I have these in the correct order that they appear in. The one last thing is you'll notice the date length, the last value, which is my current position, is currently null. And the reason why is because I wanted to make sure I was using today's date to calculate whatever that current value is. Because if someone logs in 6 months from now, I want the bar to reflect the fact that I've worked an additional 6 months since the last time I updated my dashboard. So I've just used a today's date calc, which I think is actually in one of these, but either way, oops. And the date length is just getting calculated using the duration from start date to now. So anyways, what that allows me to do with the Gantt chart, like I said, is then show that last final date as whatever today's date is. If we logged in and looked at this tomorrow, it would show tomorrow's date and so forth and so on. The one last thing that I've done, and this isn't, I think, again, important for this, is I've added on this details section more about the Gantt chart, because the Gantt chart is a cool visualization, but it doesn't actually tell most of the information that I want someone to get from my resume. And this is what Sam was talking about earlier, making sure that you are telling a good story to your audience, the people that are looking at your thing. So for me, I know that I'm looking at potential employers or people who want to collaborate with me, or people who are just appreciative of my work, or people who maybe want to figure out, hey, how do I do this with my career? I wanted to make sure all those details were captured in this Gantt chart. So it's not just, hey, I was in higher ed and I was at the University of Cincinnati for 4 years. It's got details about my bachelor's degree. It's got my GPA. You can see here that I got a 3.4. I slacked off a little bit in college. And same things about like my employment and roles and positions, you know, not too dissimilar to a standard resume. You've got things like, here were the responsibilities I had. Here's how long I was here. Maybe some of the software and skills that I exercised while I was there. And that's just on each one of the details. Like I said, that is residing in the actual data set too. So if we look at timeline again, you can see the description element. Oops. Timeline. Let's pull up another window. And it's just a big text field. Oops, that's actually the wrong one. Yeah, big long text field, a lot of things in it. All told, building this thing, I actually spent a lot of time on it, mostly because I went back and forth on the right thing to do so many times. So while it's actually a pretty simple visualization, a pretty simple dashboard, I think Sam also kind of made a point of this in his conversation with us, was spending time and really thinking about who's going to consume it and why are they going to consume it and how are they best going to read and receive it. I redesigned and redesigned and redesigned this a bunch of times. And so while it's very simple, it represents, I think, the process of refining a design down to the essence of exactly what I wanted to capture, no more, no less. So anyways, I hope that that's helpful for a handful of people. Maybe that inspires some of y'all to go build your own Tableau resume. Like I said, I highly recommend it. Sam mentioned this earlier, get involved online and get involved with Tableau Twitter, with Makeover Mondays, with Workout Wednesdays. All of those projects are very, very helpful and awesome. I myself got involved with Makeover Mondays in 2018, and it was because of my participation, I got into tech. I got a job offer from a recruiter who looked at my stuff and said, "Hey, you're making cool things. Want to come do that at our tech company?" And since then, it's just been like absolute career rocket fuel for me. So I cannot emphasize that enough. If you're looking to move up in your career, if you're looking to make a change in your career, if you're looking to just get better at doing this stuff, go get involved online, go get involved with Makeover Mondays. It sounds like this has never been a perfect time to get involved because it's getting kicked back off right now. Highly, highly, highly recommend that. So with that in mind, does anyone else have quick questions for me? Otherwise, I don't know, Ashley, if our next speaker is available yet.
Yes, Jack is on.
Okay.
Someone
Cool.
asked if there's UX resources that you would recommend for Tableau developers.
There are, and if whoever asked that, if you're interested in learning more, go connect with me on LinkedIn and shoot me that message, because I don't have those things right in front of me or available, but I have several different books and links that I can send your way. There's a couple of generic things that I will just say. So like Sam mentioned earlier, get familiar with like Gestalt principles. Gestalt principles generated in kind of like the 1930s, comes out of the Bauhaus design movement, and it's all focused on cognitive understanding of design in context of understanding communication. So it's the birthplace of modern graphic design. If you understand Gestalt principles, you understand probably 70 to 80% of what you need to build incredibly intuitive dashboards. And Sam's blasting a couple things in there. So yeah, I highly recommend all of those things too. Any other questions from the larger group?
Well, great
Awesome.
presentation, Tom. I'm inspired to make my own Tableau resume this weekend. And
Or the
also,
next month, you mean more like?
Yeah.
Because you'll reevaluate it a million times.
Oh yes, I'll be going back and forth on layouts for maybe a month on its own. And yet this is our showcase section that we'd like to continue. This is a great platform, you know, if you have content that you want to show, kind of what we were talking about, if you're looking for positions or anything like that, this is a great way to brag on yourself. We're a friendly community, so you know, whether it's your first dashboard and you want to share it and get advice, or it's something you're really proud of and you just want to share it and show everyone what you can do, this is the place for you. And with that being said, I'm going to share super fast before I pass it over to Jack, just so I can brag about him a little bit. So hopefully you all can see my screen. Jack Parry is our next and final presenter. He is a solution consulting lead at the Data School in New York. And he's also a co-leader of the Tableau Prep user group, which we're actually going to be talking about prep in this next presentation, and a leader of the New York Tableau user group. So if you're interested in attending either of those, Jack is always sharing their stuff on LinkedIn, so definitely follow him and check that out. And with that being said, I will stop sharing and let you take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. That was a kind introduction. Let me share my screen and then we can get going. And thank you for waiting for me. Got here in the end. We're still deliberating over some candidates, but here to do the presentation. So hi everyone, thanks for having me. I am Jack Parry. I'm here to talk to you today about Tableau Prep. So Ashley had a conversation with me about how Tableau Prep hasn't really been presented or delved into at all in the Chicago Tug. So I've titled this tips, tricks and use cases. What I'm going to do is take you through a really simple prepping data challenge. I'll talk about what that is a little bit in a moment, showing how easy Tableau Prep can use. So the challenge actually focuses on not using any written calculations and using all the functionality that's just built into prep through clicking and interacting with the tool. And then just to conclude, I'll talk about some of the use cases that we've seen over the years at the Tableau Prep user group that might help start you thinking about how you could benefit from using Tableau Prep. Background to me, that's me, but you can see me. I'm also wearing the same t-shirt, so that's fun. I am a Tableau ambassador, so I'm a user group ambassador. As Ashley said, I lead the Tableau Prep user group, also the New York City user group. I work in New York City as part of the data school in New York, actually in this building here right now. And I'm obviously not from New York, I'm actually from London. So I went through the data school program in London. We've recently launched that here in New York, so I'm part of growing that. So if you want to get involved in any of those user groups, then please come along. I've also recently been asked to get involved in the virtual FinServe user group, so I don't know, I might have too many on my plate soon, but I enjoy doing them, so it's fun. So before I dive into prep itself, I wanted to talk about Tableau Prep as a product. So Tableau Prep was released in 2018, so it's been around for a few years now, and it's grown a lot as a tool. When it first was released, it was pretty unstable, I have to say. The functionality wasn't great. It was fine, but it didn't really stand up against many other tools, whereas now I think it encompasses a lot of what you could need from a data preparation tool when you are preparing data for use in Tableau. Something that we get asked a lot at the prep user group is, you know, what's better, Tableau Prep or Alteryx? They're different tools in my eyes. Alteryx has been around for a long, long time and serves a greater purpose than Prep. Prep's more designed for taking a couple of data sources, combining them together and getting them ready for your analysis in Tableau Desktop. Whereas Alteryx is just a bigger beast entirely. You can do far more predictive modeling. You can do a lot of spatial analytics. You can download HTML and pass that out. Prep's not designed for that, so I think it's unfair to compare them as a tool, but just wanted to say that as it often comes up as a question. But with Tableau Prep as a product, there are two parts to the product, I would say. So we have Tableau Prep Builder, which is what I'm going to be showcasing today. It's the desktop application where you will build and curate flows. So we'll connect to data, we might add some cleaning steps, we might combine this with other data sources. We could do some predictions, you can add some scripting into Prep. So you can add Python scripts, you can add R scripts, and you can also add in predictions from Einstein Discovery if there's any big Salesforce users out there. And it's Tableau stab at this self-service data preparation, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. It's available both in desktop and in browser. So unlike Tableau Desktop, where it's getting there with web edit, I mean, the feature parity is not 100%, but it's got a lot better recently, and that's where they're going. Whereas Prep Builder was designed as an application for the web first. It hasn't always been available in the browser, but that's what Tableau had in mind. So all of the functionality you have on Prep Builder on your desktop is the same on server or Tableau Cloud. So I've used it quite a lot in the cloud and it does work really well. So don't be put off by that, as I know sometimes web edit is good for desktop if you've already built your dashboard and want to make a few tweaks or changes, but I wouldn't design entirely in there, where you could do that with Prep Builder. It's included with your creator licenses as well, so there's no additional cost. This comes up a lot as well when talking about Tableau Prep with our clients and customers. Really, they don't want to take on this additional burden and don't actually realize that they already have access to Tableau Prep. There's then this second part of Tableau Prep called Tableau Prep Conductor. What Prep Conductor allows you to do is to schedule your prep flows on Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud. And without Prep Conductor, you can still publish your flows like you would publish a workbook, and someone could manually run them. So it doesn't inhibit you from running flows on your server, but it does allow you to schedule them. So it comes as part of the data management add-on. So if you don't have the data management add-on, there will be an additional cost associated with Prep Conductor. And in the more recent releases, you can now link tasks together. So if you have a flow that creates a data source that then needs to be used in another flow, and you want to kick those flows off one after the other, you can do that now with Prep Conductor. And you can have these really nice features as well built in, which allow for data alerts and email subscriptions. So with data alerts, if you're publishing to a data source on Tableau server and something goes wrong with your flow, let's say the flow runs daily and you're appending new rows to your data source, and one day the flow errors, there will then be a warning on your data source just to highlight to the end user that the data might not be accurate. So it can save you a lot of time when a flow might have failed overnight for whatever reason, something might have changed in the database in the back end. All these things can happen. And it saves the consumer of the dashboard then coming back to someone and asking, why is the data not up to date? And they'll immediately see that there's something gone wrong with the flow. And you can also have email subscriptions to these. So instead of you having to check up on the flow every morning, you'll be notified straight to your inbox. So that's a nice feature that they've added to Prep Conductor recently. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say on that. No, it's just remember that it doesn't stop you from running your flows online, but it does allow a scheduling, and that's what I was going to say. I knew there was something. There are ways around this. So if, and I'm not saying this as, Tableau aren't going to tell me off for this because they have it documented. If you don't want to buy Prep Conductor, data management add-on, there is a cost with it. You can still schedule prep flows with Windows Task Scheduler. There is some documentation on how you can do that. Obviously, that is dependent on having the prep flow run on a machine that remains powered on. So if I were to schedule flows on my own laptop, of course, the laptop needs to be on overnight if you have a prep flow that's scheduled to run at 3 a.m. But there are ways around that scheduling. And as I say, that's not a secret unknown thing. Tableau do talk about that themselves. So I touched on self-service data preparation. The phrase gets thrown around a lot, I find, when talking about Tableau prep. So just to dive into that a little bit more, what prep is trying to do is enable everyone to have the opportunity to clean and prepare that data ready for analysis. So when working with data, it's often so messy and your sources are very disparate, and you're going to have to combine that data together. And without this stage, it can make it quite difficult for anyone to do any kind of analysis in Tableau desktop. And often that might be done through writing SQL. It might be done by just someone separate in the team that has this skill set. Whereas prep is easy to use. The interface is very nice. It's drag and drop like Tableau. You can write calculations. What I'm going to show you today is that you can solve challenges and problems without actually having to write many calculations at all. And it really empowers far more people to start thinking about how data needs to be structured and how they need to clean that data ready for analysis, and hopefully will empower more people with a broader skill set in the field. So now I'm going to show you how easy Tableau prep can be. So we'll do a quick demo and then I'll talk about those use cases briefly. Before we get going, I'll just showcase, wherever it's gone, the challenge that I'm trying to solve. So prepping data is a community-led scheme. You might have heard of it, you might not have heard of it. So in the same fashion as Makeover Monday and Workout Wednesday, a challenge is released every week. And the team release a data set, and they release a set of instructions for you to get from A to B. So it doesn't tell you exactly what to do, but they give you some guidance and they provide this output for you. So this challenge focuses particularly on, you can see right here, not to use any typed calculations, which at first sounds off-putting. I think if you're doing these challenges, you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to type any calculations, but it's a really good way of showing how simple prep can be and not having to write anything in a calculated field or any kind of syntax, which might originally put people off a data preparation task. So we have two tables. We have potential store locations. We've got some potential sales, the cost of the store, and some locations, which are a little bit messy. We've got a currency conversion table. So we can see here we need to add the conversion rates, but not change everything to USD. We need to remove some rows of data of inaccurate city or country names. I'm going to actually tweak that a little bit to show some extra functionality. And then we want to show the store per zip code that has the most sales. And then we want to remove any instances where the store cost is higher than potential store sales. So I will talk you through that in prep. So if you've never opened up prep before, this is what you get when you first open up the tool. You will straight away see some similarities with Tableau Desktop. So we have recent workflows in the middle. We've got some resources over on the right-hand side, some sample flows. And then the first thing that we want to do is to connect to some data. So I'm just going to connect to the data that we're working with today. It's just a simple Excel file. And to start working with these data sources, I'll just drag out my two tables onto my canvas. So this white space here. I get some preview of the fields. So as I just identified from the task, got locations. We can see there some of those are spelt wrong, like New York with an E and New York normally, but we can clean those up really easily. Got store locations, costs, and we've got this currency conversion table. The first thing I want to do is add a clean step. So that's how we start working with our data in prep. Gives us a preview of what we're working with. So we now have this profile pane. I've just got two rows of data there, two fields indicated here. That's my currency. Let's have a look at the rest of the data. So I've got my store cost, potential sales, location, so zip codes, and the location itself. First thing I need to do is find a way to tie in the currency to this data. So I can see that I've got currency code in my store cost and my store potential sales, but I need to separate that out. So something that you can do in Tableau Desktop here is perform a split. So maybe that's what we want to do here. To perform that split, I can just just select that option, split values, and we can just do an automatic split. Really simple. We now have those two fields separated. If I want to rename these fields, I could just get rid of my original store cost because I don't need that right now. So I'm just going to hit remove. And we'll rename this store cost. So double click. This is the only typing I'm really going to have to do. No calculations, but I can use the keyboard to rename the field. So we'll call that store cost, and we can call that currency. So now we want to perform this join. Join is fairly straightforward. So we can pick up one clean step and put it next to another. And when I drag and drop that, you'll see I can have a union or a join. And I like how Tableau's built this because it makes sense to me that the union goes underneath and the join goes to the right, because when you're unioning two data sources, you're going to make your table longer. You have common fields, but you're just adding to the row count, whereas joining, you're typically adding more columns. It could still increase the row count, but it makes sense to put this to the right. I'll drop that there. It's automatically picked up my currency field. I get this really nice preview of my data, so I can see that I had 2 rows coming from clean 1, 20 from clean 2, and then this result is 20 rows. So I know straight away that I'm not getting any duplication in my data. So that's a really nice, I really like the join functionality of Tableau Prep. Sometimes if I'm joining 2 tables together in desktop and I'm not sure if I'm getting any duplication, I'm just going to chuck it straight into prep because it's really good for exploring the profile of your data and what's going on. Much easier to do so sometimes than just working in Tableau desktop. So going beyond just the joins, sometimes I'll put a data set in here just to explore it and understand it a little bit more. And then it doesn't necessarily need any cleaning, but through the use of this profile pane, which shows you the distribution of values, those kinds of things, it's really useful. Of course, I could build this out through worksheets in desktop, but I have all of that information straight away in prep. So I'll add another clean step, but you'll notice when I add this plus, there's many steps that we could add. So we could generate new rows, and I'll talk about that with one of the use cases later on. We can aggregate values. We could use a pivot, join, union scripting tool. So we could add Python or R scripts, as I mentioned, predictions and outputs. We'll add another clean step. And I've got an additional currency field, so I could get rid of that. The next thing I want to deal with are my locations. So again, we're going to split this up. I'll do a split, an automatic split. And this time, prep has only given me the first half of the split. The reason for this is that because a lot of the values are, so prep tries to do this intelligently, and there's lots of values for United States after the comma. Granted, they're not all United States, but it is tried to interpret that I don't want that, which is not the case. So I can do a custom split. And what's nice is I can always go back and edit my changes. So we've got this changes panel where I can just click back through the changes I've made. So I see the calculation that prep has produced in the background. So it's just using a split function like you would in desktop. But I could just get rid of this and change this to now a custom split. So I'm just going to split off the comma and we'll do all values. We could rename this city. And we'll name this country. So these values are quite messy. There's a lot of spelling mistakes, and in another tool, if we were doing this in Excel maybe, or even in Alteryx, to be honest, quite difficult to clean up all these values without maybe some kind of like mapping or lots of steps, or just manually correcting them, which I've only got 20 rows of data here, so maybe that's not going to take that long, but I still don't really want to have to do that. I'm first going to assign geographic roles to these because I'm going to be using this in desktop, and we can do that really easily in prep. So instead of having to do all of that change in Tableau desktop, I can go down here, and I don't actually want to go there. I want to click on my data type, and I can assign this a geographic role. So when I load that into Tableau, it's automatically going to have that role associated with it. So I can make these cities. And we can make this country. You'll see I get some red flags because some of these are named incorrectly. So we want to do some cleanup there. We also get some recommendations, which is really nice about prep. So we, yeah, you can close the door if you want. No, don't close it. Sorry about that. So we might want to group some of these values together, or we might want to filter out the selected value. So if you remember at the beginning, the challenge told me to get rid of any incorrectly spelt values. But I want to change that slightly because Tableau Prep has some really nice grouping functionality. First of all, I could just double click in here and start changing these, which is very manual. And that's not the route we're going to go down, but it's worth showing because it's one of the things I like about prep. When you're working with this kind of data, you just want to click and change things and interact with it. And Prep makes that really easy. But as I say, you would have to do that for lots of values if this data source was bigger. So I'm just going to undo that. And in this menu, we can group our values. So we could do a manual selection, kind of similar to what we just did, or we could group values on spelling or pronunciation and spelling. So if I hit spelling here, we can see that some values have now been grouped up. So Prep's cleaned up those values straight away, and I can increase the sensitivity of this grouping as well. If I have a look, I can see that San Francisco and San Francisca have been grouped together. We've now got New York and New Yorkie have automatically been grouped. It's not quite working here, and Miami and Mia are not working. So we could increase the sensitivity of this grouping. That might help with Miami. What have we got now? Mia and Maya. So that's still not working. So it's not a perfect science, but it can help a lot. So what I'm going to do is you can just tweak these groupings. So I can click on Miami and I want Maya and Mia to be, oh, I just need to let it process one of them. And we'll put Maya in there. And then we can just clean up Monterey as well. So we'll put in Monty and Montree. Hadn't fully sorted it out. There we go. So it's not perfect, but when your data is messy like this, it's rarely going to be perfect, but it goes a long way to having to manually type values or come up with some intelligent logic to group all of those together. So I think it's probably one of my favorite features about Prep. Now we've got those sorted, we could try and sort these country fields. So I'm just going to group those on pronunciation and spelling, see what we get. And that's worked really nicely. Easy, I don't have to do anything else. Now, what's nice about Prep is that at any point I can preview my data in desktop. So if I right click on a clean step, I can preview this in Tableau desktop. It's going to run that flow, and in the background here, it's opening up desktop. So I'll show you that in a minute. And it's nice to just be able to preview your data at any point in the flow, just to check that you're going along the right lines. And it means I don't have to say, if this was a production workflow and I was writing out to a database, I'm not having to run that flow or run it out to a file or anything like that. I can just quickly preview. I can see that that's come through as a country field. I can plot those on a map. It's working as it should. So I'm happy with how this is going. The next steps, we want to find the maximum sales per zip code and remove the rest. So I'm going to perform an aggregate here and then do a self join on that zip code. So we can use this join as a filter almost. So if you were doing this in desktop or you were writing calculations, you might be thinking along the lines of a fixed LOD, which you can do in Prep, but the task here is to use no calculations. So you might fix on your zip code and find the maximum store cost and then like filter where the store cost doesn't equal the maximum. We'll do that with an aggregate. So we could group by our location and not that one. We want to group by our potential store location, which at the moment is a number. Makes sense, it's a zip code, but maybe we want to change that. And we want to find our maximum potential sales. So let's just change that from ABC to a number, because otherwise the max is not going to work correctly. We can drag that across. And we want that to be a max. And that is not working because I've tried to change the data type in the aggregate. So let's just change it back here. Again, really nice with Prep that you can just go back and add changes, remove changes. You're not having to rerun flows or anything like that because it happens on the fly. So let's just change this to a number. And that should flow through now. Why is it not? Oh, I'll tell you why. Because we haven't split it up, it's still got its USD. So again, I can just click back through the changes. So I can go back to before it becomes a number. Let's just, oh yeah, I can show you something else that's nice. We can clean this and just remove all the letters. There we go, really easy, just one simple click. And now we've got our number. Now if we aggregate this, find the maximum, there we go. So now I want to join that back on the location. We'll filter out, or we don't want to do that on the sales, actually, we want to do that on potential store location. And we want to join where, oh, actually, yeah, it was better to join on the sales. Join on where store potential sales is equal to the maximum. And now we've got 5 locations where there are 2 potential stores, and the one that has the lower maximum potential sales we've got rid of that. So we've used some smart logic in the join to filter out results and not had to use any calculations again. The final step that we want to take, so we can drop out these additional fields once again. Is that we want to remove any stores where the cost is going to be higher than the potential sales. Makes sense if we're not going to be able to cover our costs. And we can do that by self-joining this data and acting as a filter again. So if I just add an additional clean step in here, I've got 2 branches of the same data. And I'm going to use my store potential sales and the location to join back and specify a join condition where my sales are greater than the cost. I'm going to drop out a load of fields here because otherwise they're all going to come through with the join and I'm going to have to remove them later on. So I can make that quite easy for myself by changing to this list view and just maintaining my potential store location and my store potential sales. So I can just hit cross on most of these. There we go. Now we'll join this on. And at the moment, all of those are matching the sales, which makes sense because we're just saying where they're equal and it's the same data, but we can change this join condition, which is another thing I really like about prep. So we could say where my potential sales are not, we don't want to use the same fields. We want to say where my store cost is less than my store potential sales. And I also want to join, I'm getting a mass duplication here because every instance of where the sales are, the cost is less than the sales value is going to match to it. So it's comparing everything against everything, essentially. So we want to add another condition that's looking where the stores match as well. And now we can see that 2 stores have been excluded. So we don't want to target those for our analysis. So we're left with 13 rows. We've identified our potential stores, and we've done that all without adding any calculations to this. So this is sort of an introduction to Tableau Prep. Hopefully you've seen that it is very easy to use. You can do a lot without being intimidated by any calculations. And you shouldn't be intimidated by the calculations because the syntax is all very similar to desktop. You can do a lot of the same things, but hopefully this has given you an insight into what prep looks like, how you can make use of it, and maybe made you excited to use it. I'll talk briefly about some use cases we've seen at the user group. I appreciate that if you're used to using Tableau Prep, this isn't anything mind-blowing. Maybe it is, maybe you've learned a few things along the way there. But I'll talk about these use cases briefly. So we had Stephen Paul. I feel like I'm, you know, a fraud with these slides because it's other people's work, but this is what we've seen at the user group. And I'd encourage you to check out some of the past recordings if you want to see some nice use cases of prep in a business environment. So we had Stephen Paul, who works for Deloitte down in New Zealand, talking about, he was working for a client who had some very underperforming dashboards. They had loads of data sources, and the reporting process for this was very arduous. They had lots of data sources that they combined together monthly. They combined all of these in Tableau Desktop. There were like 7 unions and 2 joins, and someone would have to go in every month and manually replace files or add new files, which takes time. And it's not a task that anyone really well, maybe there's someone out there who wants to do that, but I'd be surprised. They could spend their time doing much more valuable work. And so Stephen had used prep to create this repeatable process that can then ingest. It's not something I've shown there, but using a technique called wildcard unions that's always going to read in new files once they've been dropped in a folder to combine those data sources. There were some quite complicated charts as well in the dashboard that he showed, where the data was not necessarily at the most appropriate level of detail for those charts. And by aggregating in prep, he's reduced the number of rows in the data source and therefore made the performance of Tableau Desktop a lot better. So the rendering of these charts was much more performant. There was a lot of unnecessary data that was got rid of, and ultimately reduced the time it took to complete this monthly reporting exercise. So saving the business money at the end of the day, because employees can spend time on other tasks that are more valuable, and making everyone's lives easier. So that was one really nice use case that I saw. And you'll see some similar themes throughout these use cases of places you can use prep. But another one that Jonathan Drummey, who some of you may have heard of, he's a Tableau visionary multiple times. He's a genius really when it comes to Tableau. But Jonathan showed this use case of mapping mismatched data. So what I mean specifically by that is combining data from different sources that's in an inconsistent format. So for example, if you had in one source, country names are in one format, I say format, spelt in certain ways, or what's the best way to describe this? There'll be some examples that are exactly the same. So like the United States might be in one source, the United States, another source, it might be the United States of America, or that kind of thing. And different spellings need to be combined and mapped together so we can use them in our analysis, because we don't want to be reporting sales for the United States and also sales for the United States of America when they are representing the same thing. So this is a really smart thing that Jonathan's done, and created what he calls these crosswalk tables. So he makes use of the cleaning functionality that I've demonstrated there in prep to go through sort of each of the stages of grouping. So he'll first try to group on pronunciation, and he'll flag the rows that have worked, and then he'll go down and continue on this process of whittling down the data until it's right at the very bottom where there might have to be some manual grouping, but it does a lot of the hard work for him. There's, as we've seen with that grouping, it's never going to be perfect, but it goes a long way to getting rid of any manual processes and really benefiting from prep's cleaning functionality. And he was talking about how you can do this with lots of mapping tables and joins in desktop, but again, similar to Stephen's example, that's going to improve the performance of desktop. As much of this preparation and cleaning and tasks that you can take out of desktop, calculations, all of that is just going to make your dashboards far more performant. We had then Fraser. This was a recent session. The next two, actually, Fraser and Govind, were at the June of this year user group. So Fraser was working on a huge prep. I don't think I've ever seen a prep flow so large, to be honest, which I was quite impressed by, because people do sometimes still talk about the stability of prep, but this flow was massive. Like they have a flow on their wall in their office, which I'd encourage you to watch the presentation just to see it. That's something like, I don't know, 8 foot long or something crazy. But Fraser has this prep flow that helped them with mergers and acquisitions. So he was consulting for a larger firm, but in the process of acquiring new business, you're always going to be incorporating new systems. Legacy systems might have to be migrated, and this can be really challenging, but it's important to do that because otherwise you're not going to be able to report on all the data that you have in the business. And by combining those current and legacy systems together, making sure there was consistent mapping and naming of business units, and dealing with different levels of aggregation of that data, all of these tasks can be done in prep, and create some data sources for you that are going to be able to report across both the old business and the new acquisitions. He also did something really smart, that was to create parts of his flow that would remove duplicate records or identify them, publish those to a server data source, and then have alerts on that with the data management add-on. So every day they would be notified of any duplicate records that were found in the source and therefore needing to go back and clean them. Similar to Jonathan was using this using prep to map sales team representatives, ensure they're consistent across data sources so they could accurately calculate commissions for these. And then the final one I want to talk about was Govind, who works for a college on the West Coast, UC Davies, maybe, I think, and was talking about how they use prep to monitor classroom utilization. And it's really easy to visualize an event that has occurred in Tableau or any kind of reporting tool. But what do we do when something actually hasn't occurred and we don't have any data for this? And this was to look at classrooms and when they weren't being used as much as when they were being used. But when you don't have data on when they weren't being used, how can you visualize it? And Govind used a technique known as scaffolding, which you may have heard of, you may not have heard of. It's essentially where we add rows to our data that don't exist. And this can be applied to lots of different situations. So it could be applied to reservations in a restaurant or hotels, or it could be applied to office space instead of classroom space, office space, or even if you're trying to report on when sales aren't occurring, to identify periods where there's downtime and you want to identify that. So Govind showed us how you can combine lists of all your locations to explode your data set, known as scaffolding, to create rows where there hasn't been an occurrence of any data. And Govind demonstrated a more traditional approach of using a numeric scaffold to create rows of hours of the day that didn't exist otherwise. Since that presentation, or I think maybe the version of Tableau that he was operating on, there is this feature of new rows, which you can see here. It generates rows on your data set based on a single date or 2 dates. So you could say a min and max, and it's really powerful. Another example where you might want to do this is if you had open and closed tickets and you just had the date a ticket was opened and a date a ticket was closed. You can then generate rows to accurately show how many tickets were open on any given day, that kind of thing. But it does explode your data, but it allows you to visualize stuff that hasn't occurred and is a really powerful technique. So I'd encourage you to look at that. And all of these are ways that you can use Tableau Prep to your advantage. So hopefully that's spurred some inspiration within you. I appreciate that probably went on for a lot longer than I anticipated, but I like talking about Tableau Prep, and hopefully you've learned something along the way. So happy to answer any questions if there are any. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, that is my handle, Jack Parry with 2 A's. That's not a typo. But yeah, otherwise, thanks for having me. Hopefully you've enjoyed that and look forward to connecting with some of you.
That was awesome, Jack. Thanks for sharing with everyone. I've got a quick question just to kick everything off. So how long have you been using Prep? And prior to using Prep, or like prior to being heavily engaged with Prep, like what was your line of work?
So I have been using Prep for about 3.5 years now. So I started using it when I started in the data school.
Mm-hmm.
We were taught that alongside Alteryx as well. I don't have a background in data before joining that program. So I guess anytime I have had to work with data, it would have just been like manually cleaning stuff up in Excel. I still do use Alteryx as well, but as I say, for slightly different purposes sometimes. But I just found the interface of prep much more engaging. I really like the way you can interact with it. And the way I got better with prep was participating in prepping data, like those challenges I showed you. So they do release a new challenge every week. They then release a solution video, a solution blog, and along the way, so Carl Alchin, who started prepping data, wrote a book called Tableau Prep Up and Running, and that's based on working with loads of these different techniques in Tableau Prep. So if we just head to the website, wherever it's gone here, they don't have it so much in the older challenges, but if we go back to, say, like the current ones, you'll see, oh, they don't have it in these ones. They did it for a bit. They had these hints, but what they do have here is the how to prep index. So what's nice about this is it's got some, there we go, why self-service data preparation, planning your prep, all of this stuff can be applied to any data preparation challenge, but then it's grouped up into categories of connecting to data. So connecting to data in files, connecting to databases, how to profile data, dealing with samples, and this goes on quite a long way. It's the basis of Carl's book, but this is a really good resource for if you're not going to compete in the challenge, not compete,
Participate, yeah.
participate in the challenge. And you're just thinking, okay, there we go, how to create additional data. That will be talking about scaffolding. It's a really great resource for just understanding how you might do that. And this can be applied to other tools that are not just Tableau Prep, because when I teach Tableau Prep, I try to refer to everything as techniques rather than functionality of prep, because they are data preparation techniques rather than things that are specific to Tableau Prep. But this is how I went about learning and just practice, really.
Awesome.
It's, yeah, a cliche, but it works.
No, it's a good point and worth calling out quickly about what you just said. All three of the speakers tonight mentioned like Makeover Mondays or Workout Wednesdays or one of these other programs to get in and participate. One of the other things you did just mention there, Jack, that's also really important is even if you don't participate, all of these environments, all these groups, you can just show up and look at what other people are doing and still learn a ton. You don't even have to do the Workout Wednesday. There's a solution that gets posted and you can look at how someone did it and learn a cool technique. Same thing that Jack was just saying here too. You don't have to run the prep flow to learn how to actually use prep. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, exactly. I see Ashley's comment there about can prep flows be published to Tableau Public. They did announce Prep Public at not this year's TEC, maybe last year when it was remote and during COVID. It was towards the end of 2021, I think. I don't know when that's coming, but apparently it is. So look out for that in the future, I guess.
One other question. Well, I guess more of just an ask. So the New York Data School is very cool. Can you just share with everyone on the call kind of some of the work you guys do at like the data school and the information lab?
Yeah, of course. So for anyone that's unfamiliar with the data school, some people have heard of it, other people haven't. Most people have heard of it just because of blogs out there, but don't necessarily know what it is as a program. So the data school is a career accelerator program that is powered by the Information Lab. So the Information Lab is a consultancy that sits behind the data school. And what we do is we take people in who may or may not have a background in data and analytics, and we give them 4 months of intensive training. So we teach them Tableau, Tableau Prep, teach them Alteryx, Snowflake. We're also partners with Snowflake. SQL along the way, that's obviously bundled up with Snowflake. A couple of other things like touching on AWS and a bit of Salesforce as well. And then we give them 4 6-month placements with some of our clients. So what they might be doing on those placements is making over existing dashboards, improving reporting, improving the performance of dashboards, building out data pipelines. They might also be enabling some individuals within the team that they're working in. So all of the data school consultants are trained to be able to train others, because our whole business model really is we want to go and help clients and get them to a place where they don't need support of external consultants. We don't want to go in there, just build a load of dashboards and leave people with these nice dashboards that they don't know how to maintain. So there's a lot of enablement involved as well. The training is headed up globally by Andy Kriebel, who I'm sure everyone has heard of. In New York specifically, it's headed up by Ann Jackson, who I'm sure many people have also heard of. So we do have lots of big names in the Tableau community that work for us and sort of lead that data school program, which helps people get to a very good place in that 4 months. And consultants are well equipped to dealing with clients' data, as throughout that training period, we give them some live client project weeks. So a client will come in on the Monday, pitch them a brief of some dashboards that they need making over. The team will work on that for a week and then present back on the Friday. So they get a real mixture of just like classroom-led training, but also figuring things out for themselves a little bit as a consultant. We obviously give them feedback and coach them through that process, but there's a lot of self-learning along the way as well. So if you have or haven't heard about the data school, that's a bit of an insight for you. And that's why I was late for this. We're just recruiting for our second cohort in New York at the moment. So I was in interviews all day, which was fun. We heard how many 18 people talk about the squirrel census of 2019 in New York Central Park, which was fun for a while. And then
Remember that data set?
yeah, it was a Makeover Monday data set.
Yep, I remember that one.
Yeah, so know lots about squirrels in Central Park now.
Does anyone else have questions for Jack here? We've had most of our questions coming in through chat, so I think we've gotten that covered tonight. Well, thanks a lot, Jack, for also joining. I know, Ashley, thanks for bringing Jack in here. Networking for us at the Tableau conference while Kevin and I were stuck at home. If anyone else has any other like quick questions before we wrap up or something they want to say, feel free. Just as a quick reminder, our next session is in November. What's that date again, Ashley? November 3rd? Is that right?
Put it in your calendars now. It'll be
November 3rd. We'll send out stuff like normal ahead of time. If you're on the mailing list now, you'll see it again. We are on LinkedIn and we are also on Twitter. If you want to follow us on either one of those locations, we're not terribly active in either, but you'll at least get all of the main information, headlines and such of whatever's coming up next from one of those channels. Any other last quick questions for anyone before we sign off for the night? Anybody else have anything else to say? Nope, I think we're good. Okay, awesome. Thanks again to Sam and Jack for joining us tonight and taking their time out of their days. We really appreciate it, y'all. Great stuff. I learned a ton. Always love hearing from other people in the industry and what they're coming up with. So thank you for your time.